Hi, this is Australia Group 2's analysis of a language contact perspective on Indian English by Domange. While many studies have viewed Indian English as an attempt at speaking RP, Domange hypothesized that while historical Indian English may have started out as RP being the norm, just over time it has developed into a dialect independent of RP. Most previous studies have just seen Indian English as RP that only differs through influence and transfer from the Indian English speakers L1. However, there have been many studies that accept that while following this trend, that each Indian English is a separate language. Quoting Domange here, it says, "The various trends of contrastive studies seem to have a number of theoretical implications in common. Of these, the most manifest is what appears to me as a systematic conceptualism of Indian English as a sum of interlanguages." Close quote. This study is to test if RP still remains as the norm, or if Indian English has indeed developed into a norm of its own, and if it's collectively a norm or if they are different languages. To test this hypothesis, Domange will test mid and low back rounded vowels in everyday interactions with South Delhi speakers. The reason for choosing these vowels is that Domange felt that there were flaws in the previous studies either tested or interpreted the data from them. The study was for native and near-native Indian English speakers. Those that participated in the study had to participate in a word list, a reading passage, and guidelines for informal and formal conversations. Word lists 1 and 2 were tested on vowels and consonants. 10 male speakers were selected between the ages of 19 and 31. They were all educated in English from a young age, and they used English frequently. They were tested on reading the created list and the numbers that followed them. Lastly, they read the presented text. Later, they would have formal and informal conversations. Perhaps the flaw of this study is just the narrow demographics that they use this for, not testing women or older people. Word list styles and conversation styles were the only tests that were run. They first tested the speaker's mid and low rounded vowel inventory based on thoughts, got, and lost words. They averaged the frequencies from all the speakers. Next, they tested for the statistical significance with 3 different tests. For testing the statistics difference between the second formats, ANOVA and games how tests were performed. 95% of speakers' vowel categories were then graphed. Each collection was then tested individually, having results from the test run before on thoughts, goat, and lots helps with showing that force has a vowel the same as goat. Finally, north and force were tested for statistical significance of their mean F1 and F2 in a 2-sample p-test. Results show that speakers consistently produce 2 acoustically distinct vowels when comparing between lot, thought words, and goat words. Lot thought words were realized as ah, and goat words were realized as o. It was also noted that o was spoken in a lower tone than ah, which is, I don't know if I can pronounce that, o. The researchers suggest that differences in phonological context could have caused the little variation that was seen. Additionally, in comparing the qualitative and quantitative data collected on the words fill, cot, doll, and dow, the researchers cemented their conclusions that there were no differences between the vowels produced in lost and thought words. When studying north and force words, the researchers found that the speakers produced the vowels in north the same as was found in lot and thought, ah. Force words, however, varied, and the researchers split the patterns into 3 groups defined by the degree of variability in the vowel
realization. In two of the three groups, they found that in force words, the vowels before the R were fronted, which was often accompanied by a lowering in tone. The study demonstrates inter and intra-speaker regularity regarding the number of phonological distributions in mid and low back vowels. It argues that the separate phonemes in North and Fourth in Indian English are a result of variance in input. While Southern British English is usually discussed as the target language for speakers of Indian English, the data suggests that the emergence of the vowels off is the result of the dialect formation process. Furthermore, Domange argues that certain features of the vowel production in Indian English bear more similarities to 18th century Southern British English than to modern RP. Other unacknowledged influences on Indian English include Scottish English, Hiberno English, London Cockney, and Northern English. While many people assume Indian English pronunciation is guided by spelling and/or RP, the regularity in this data and the variety of linguistic influences suggest that its distinctive features are the result of older forms of Southern British English during the 18th century, as well as other regional varieties of English. The object of the present paper was not to diminish the importance of substrata, or to find the exact dosage of each of the manifold inputs which contributed to the variety, but to show that they do not fundamentally operate on different levels. Close quote. The present form of Indian English varies as a result of contact with the past and not derived from an exonormative model. Domange claims that the current Indian English varieties are not fixed, but instead may still be influenced. However, one should note that these influences are made and how these influences are made